The morning sun bathed the neighborhood in a soft golden hue as I sipped my coffee on the front porch, enjoying the peaceful start to my day. After years of hard work, I had finally purchased my dream home in a quiet suburban community, one far removed from the chaos of city life. The house stood proud with its pristine white siding, manicured lawn, and sturdy oak tree casting a protective shadow over the driveway. The tranquility, however, was soon disrupted by the unmistakable figure of Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, striding toward my property with her usual air of entitled authority. Karen was infamous in the neighborhood for her relentless enforcement of HOA rules, many of which she had crafted herself during her tenure as president. Clad in her pastel cardigan, clipboard in hand, and sunglasses perched atop her tightly curled hair, she was a force many had learned to avoid. But today, she carried something new, a shiny master key, which she flaunted like a badge of honor. "Good morning," I greeted, masking my apprehension with a polite smile. "Mr. Thompson," she replied curtly, eyeing me with barely concealed disdain. "We have a problem." Before I could respond, Karen marched past me, heading straight for my front door. I followed closely behind, my pulse quickening. She inserted the master key into the lock and twisted. Nothing happened. She tried again, her frustration mounting. "This key should work," she huffed, jiggling it aggressively. "It opens every home in this community." "Not mine," I replied calmly. "I changed the locks after I bought the house. HOA. Regulations don't grant anyone unauthorized access to private property." Karen's face flushed with anger. "You're violating community safety protocols. This is a direct violation of HOA bylaws. I have every right to enter this property to conduct an inspection." "With all due respect, Karen, you have no legal authority to enter my home without my permission or a warrant," I stated firmly. Karen's eyes narrowed. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice dripping with faux urgency. "Yes, I need immediate assistance. I have a homeowner here who is refusing to comply with HOA regulations and preventing a mandated inspection." As she continued her exaggerated narrative, I remained composed, knowing that the dispatcher on the other end was none other than my son, Ethan. He had taken a job at the local emergency dispatch center after graduating, and we had often joked about the possibility of Karen causing trouble. "Ma'am, please stay calm," Ethan's steady voice came through the speaker. "Can you provide your exact location and the nature of the emergency?" Karen, oblivious to who she was speaking with, launched into a tirade about my supposed violations and her fabricated authority. Ethan, recognizing his father's address, maintained his professionalism while subtly probing for more information. "I understand your concern," Ethan said calmly. "However, from what you're describing, this appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal emergency. Law enforcement typically doesn't intervene in HOA disputes unless there's a clear and present danger." Karen's voice rose in pitch, her frustration boiling over. "He is obstructing an official inspection. This is a safety issue." "Understood, ma'am. Officers are en route to assess the situation," Ethan replied, maintaining his composed demeanor. Within minutes, a patrol car arrived, its lights flashing as two officers stepped out. Karen immediately approached them, launching into her rehearsed speech. The officers listened patiently before turning to me. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" one of them asked. "Of course," I said, handing over my property deed and the documentation showing I had legally changed the locks upon purchase. "I'm well within my rights. HOA rules do not supersede private property laws." The officers reviewed the documents and exchanged glances. "Everything appears to be in order here, ma'am," one of them said to Karen. "You cannot force entry into his home without consent or a court order." Karen's face twisted in indignation. "But the HOA has regulations." "Regulations don't override state law," the officer replied firmly. "If you attempt to enter his property without permission, you could be charged with trespassing." Realizing her plan had backfired, Karen's shoulders sagged. The officers offered me a nod of reassurance before departing, leaving Karen standing on my porch fuming and defeated. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming off. I watched her retreat with a mixture of relief and amusement. I pulled out my phone and called Ethan, thanking him for his professionalism and support. "Anytime, Dad," he chuckled. "Karen's antics are becoming legendary around here." As the days went by, Karen's attempts to assert control over my property grew increasingly desperate. She filed frivolous complaints with the HOA board, accusing me of everything from improper landscaping to unauthorized renovations. Each complaint was meticulously documented and countered with evidence, exposing her baseless accusations. Meanwhile, the HOA board, growing weary of Karen's antics, began to distance themselves from her. Several board members resigned, unwilling to be associated with her escalating behavior. New elections were called, and for the first time in years, the community saw the opportunity for real change. During the election meeting, residents gathered in the community center, eager to voice their concerns and vote for new leadership. Karen, desperate to retain her influence, delivered a passionate speech filled with fear-mongering and half-truths, but the crowd was unmoved. When it was my turn to speak, I emphasized the importance of fairness, transparency, and community spirit. The votes were cast, and the results were decisive. Karen was ousted, and a new board, committed to restoring harmony and trust, took over. The changes were immediate and profound. Rules were revised to respect homeowners' rights, and the oppressive atmosphere that had plagued the neighborhood began to lift. Karen, now stripped of her power, became a pariah. Her once loyal supporters abandoned her, and she eventually sold her home and moved away, unable to bear the weight of her own downfall. Peace returned to the neighborhood, and I could finally enjoy my home without the constant threat of unwarranted intrusion. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset and sipping my coffee, I reflected on the ordeal. The battle had been exhausting, but standing up for my rights had not only protected my home, but had also sparked a transformation within the community. The nightmare was over, and Willow Creek had emerged stronger, more united, and free from the shadow of Karen's tyranny. However, even after Karen's departure, her legacy lingered like a bad memory. Some newer residents remained unaware of the depth of her manipulation and quietly questioned the need for such dramatic changes. To ensure that the community wouldn't slide back into old patterns, the new board established a community advisory committee where homeowners could participate directly in governance and policy decisions. As part of this committee, I worked closely with Margaret, the new HOA president. She was firm but fair, embodying the transparency and neighborly cooperation we had fought so hard to achieve. Together, we helped rewrite the HOA bylaws, inserting clear protections for homeowner rights and strict limits on board authority. Every rule change required a full community vote, ensuring no one person could abuse power again. The more the neighborhood evolved, the more it began to attract attention beyond Willow Creek. Local news outlets covered our story, framing it as a cautionary tale but also as a blueprint for HOA reform. State representatives even reached out to study our new policies as potential models for statewide HOA regulation improvements. One evening, a knock came at my door. Opening it, I found an elderly man standing there, a reporter named David who had followed our story for months. He asked if I'd be willing to give an interview for an upcoming feature on HOA abuses across the state. Sitting down on my porch, I recounted the saga in detail, explaining how unchecked authority, personal vendettas, and legal loopholes nearly tore apart a peaceful community. David's article was widely shared, putting more public pressure on state lawmakers to rein in abusive HOAs. Within a year, several new bills passed requiring HOAs to maintain open financial records, undergo regular audits, and enforce term limits on board members. The tide was turning not only for Willow Creek, but for countless communities facing similar Battles Ethan, now well into his career as a senior dispatcher, became somewhat of a local hero in his own right. His professional handling of Karen's 911 call had gone viral after the body cam footage was released as part of public records. He was promoted to a supervisory role and even offered consulting opportunities to train other dispatchers in conflict, de-escalation. Life continued to improve. Community barbecues, charity drives, and holiday events flourished. Children played freely in the park without fear of arbitrary HOA citations. My home, once a target of constant harassment, stood as a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up for one's rights. Sometimes I'd walk through the neighborhood and see subtle reminders of what we'd overcome. An old security camera post where Karen once documented every perceived violation, now empty and rusting. The community bulletin board that once displayed Karen's exhaustive list of regulations, now filled with flyers for block parties and tutoring services. But not everything was perfect. Every so often, a new resident would arrive with ambitions of restoring strict HOA rule. Fortunately, the strong bylaws, active advisory committee, and an engaged community made such attempts short-lived. The power no longer rested with one person. It belonged to everyone equally. As another anniversary of Karen's departure approached, Margaret suggested a neighborhood celebration, one not to gloat over past conflict, but to honor how far we had come. The event was filled with laughter, food, and stories, bringing new and old residents together as a unified community. During the closing speech, Margaret publicly thanked me for my role in defending homeowner rights and helping create a model for others to follow. As I looked across the smiling faces of my neighbors, I knew we had not only rebuilt Willow Creek, we had fortified it against future tyranny. And that, I realized, was the true victory. One earned not through anger or revenge, but through unity, persistence, and the quiet strength of doing what's right, even when it's hard. Months passed, and the memory of Karen's dramatic fall from power slowly faded into the fabric of our community's collective history. Yet, the scars of her reign still lingered in subtle ways. Neighbors remained hyper-aware of their rights, and even the smallest procedural matters were now treated with a level of transparency that had once seemed impossible. The community had learned its lesson. Absolute power in the hands of one individual was dangerous, even within the seemingly mundane world of an HOA. The advisory committee, where I continued to serve, remained vigilant, ensuring that the reforms we had fought so hard for were upheld and respected. One quiet Saturday morning, as I tended to the rose bushes lining my walkway, my phone buzzed. It was Margaret. "Good morning," she greeted, though her tone was unusually tense. "We have a situation." "What's going on?" I asked, wiping dirt from my hands. "It's about a new resident," she explained. "A woman named Deborah. She's been attending committee meetings and has been very vocal about restoring the old order. She believes the HOA needs stronger oversight and even hinted at proposing measures similar to the ones Karen once enforced." I sighed. History has a funny way of repeating itself, doesn't it? "She's rallying a small group who share her views," Margaret continued. "We need to address this before it snowballs." We scheduled an emergency committee meeting that evening. As members gathered in the community center, the air buzzed with nervous energy. Deborah, a tall woman with an icy demeanor and perfectly coiffed hair, sat confidently with a few supporters flanking her. Her eyes gleamed with ambition, reminiscent of Karen's unyielding stare. "I appreciate all the hard work this committee has done," Deborah began, her voice smooth and practiced. "But I believe we've swung too far in favor of individual freedoms. The HOA's primary function is to maintain community standards, and we've become lax. Property values could suffer." "We appreciate your concern," Margaret replied diplomatically, "but the reforms were enacted to protect homeowners from overreach and abuse. We must strike a balance." "Balance requires discipline," Deborah countered, "and discipline requires authority." The room grew tense. I spoke up, choosing my words carefully. Deborah. The previous model of strict authority led to division and conflict. The community voted overwhelmingly for these changes because they wanted fairness and transparency. Sometimes people don't know what's best for them, she said sharply. Leadership means making tough decisions. Margaret calmly interjected. Leadership also means listening to the people you serve. We won't allow a return to autocracy. The meeting ended with no resolution, but it was clear that Deborah wouldn't give up easily. Over the following weeks, she campaigned aggressively, attempting to sway newer residents who hadn't experienced Karen's regime. Flyers appeared in mailboxes promoting her vision of a stronger, safer community. Whispered conversations at community events hinted at growing support. One evening, as I sat on my porch reflecting on the brewing storm, Ethan arrived for a visit. He had been promoted again, now overseeing a regional dispatch center. After catching up, I shared my concerns. "Sounds like you're dealing with another mini Karen," he joked. "That's exactly what worries me," I admitted. "We worked so hard to fix things. I don't want to see it all unravel." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Then it's time to remind people what's at stake. You can't assume they all know the history." His advice sparked an idea. With Margaret's support, we organized a community forum, a chance for longtime residents to share their experiences and for newer ones to learn the full story. Flyers went out, social media announcements were posted, and on the evening of the event, the community center was packed. Margaret opened the forum with a brief speech about the importance of history and community values. Then, one by one, residents stood to share their personal accounts of living under Karen's rule. Constant citations for minor infractions, invasive inspections, the fear of retaliation for speaking out. When it was my turn, I recounted the infamous incident when Karen tried to use a master key to enter my home without permission, leading to the 911 call that exposed her overreach. I detailed the months of harassment, the legal battles, and ultimately, the community's victory in reclaiming its autonomy. Ethan also spoke, recounting his experience handling Karen's emergency call that day. His calm professionalism contrasted sharply with Karen's hysteria, and hearing it directly from the dispatcher added a layer of authenticity that resonated with the audience. As the stories unfolded, Deborah's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The forum concluded with a Q&A session where newer residents asked thoughtful questions, expressing gratitude for the clarity. In the days that followed, Deborah's momentum stalled. Her support dwindled as more residents recognized the dangers of concentrated power. At the next committee meeting, she made a final push, proposing a motion to restore strict HOA authority. The vote wasn't even close. Her motion was overwhelmingly rejected. Faced with undeniable opposition, Deborah resigned from the committee and eventually sold her home, leaving quietly without the drama that had marked Karen's exit. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief, grateful to have averted another crisis. With the threat neutralized, the committee refocused on positive initiatives, organizing charity drives, enhancing neighborhood security through voluntary patrols, and expanding community events that fostered unity. The advisory committee also introduced educational sessions for new homeowners, ensuring everyone understood their rights and responsibilities within the HOA framework. Months turned into years, and Willow Creek flourished. The neighborhood became known not just for its beautiful homes and scenic parks, but for its model governance. Other communities sought guidance from us, and several advisory committee members, including myself, were invited to speak at regional HOA conferences. Ethan's reputation also continued to grow. His handling of the Karen incident had become a case study in dispatcher training programs. He even published a book on crisis communication, blending personal anecdotes with professional insights. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, I stumbled upon a group of children playing near a commemorative plaque recently installed near the community center. It read, "In recognition of the residents of Willow Creek, who stood together to protect their homes, their rights, and each Other. May this serve as a reminder that unity and integrity build stronger communities. Reading the inscription, I felt a deep sense of pride. We had not only overcome adversity, but had created a lasting legacy of resilience and cooperation. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it was worth every step. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Willow Creek, I returned to my porch, coffee in hand, at peace with the knowledge that our community's spirit remained unbreakable. The battles we fought had shaped us, but it was our unwavering commitment to fairness, transparency, and unity that secured our future. And as I sat there, watching neighbors greet each other with genuine smiles, children's laughter echoing through the streets, and the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, I knew that Willow Creek would continue to thrive, not because of any one person, but because of the strength and integrity of its people.